Hello. Just take a minute to look at yourself. I bet most of you are wearing at least one item of knitted clothing. It's not something you really think about, is it? We kind of take knitwear for granted, don't we? But the history of English knitwear is an amazing story of inventiveness, creativity, poverty and riots. Queen Elizabeth I even put in an appearance. But most importantly, part of that history started right here in Nottinghamshire. William Lee invented the framework knitting machine in Calverton, Nottinghamshire. Before William Lee, everything was knitted by hand. Look at these. Hundreds of years before William Lee, this is the sort of thing your grandma might have knitted you for Christmas. William Lee changed all of that by inventing the very first stocking frame. This machine would go on to revolutionise the textiles trade. It would make processing of knitting 100 times faster than by hand. Amazing. Not that that was any consolation to William Lee. Queen Elizabeth refused grant to patents, and poor William Lee died penniless in France. Lee's brother perfected the design and brought the framework knitting machine back to England. The framework knitting machine was one of the earliest industrial processes. It was the technological backbone of the textiles trade, and most of the work done in Nottinghamshire was right in the centre of the industry. 90% of the country's framework knitting happened in the East Midlands. Literally half the population of Ruddington were involved in the knitting trade. But you could put any idea of big factories or massive clunking machines straight out your head, because that came later. Before then, all the knitting had to be done in cottages, like this one. Not to mention the fact that the knitters had to buy their own material, and they had to rent the frame from the same person that owned their house. This meant everybody, men, women and children, had to pitch in to make ends meet. So the work was done by the entire family. But in spite of all the hard work, most families living and working in places like this wouldn't make any real money. A common insult in Victorian Britain was to refer to someone as being as poor as a Stockinger, by which they meant a framework knitter. In 1833 there was a royal commission on children in factories, and evidence was given about their poverty and misery.
I can tell a Stockinger well by his appearance. There is a certain paleness of complexion, a degree of emaciation and thinness. They're often physically deteriorated, mentally depressed, and too often morally debased, ill-fed, ill-lodged, and ill-clothed.
Ye kind-hearted souls, pray attend to our song, and hear this true story, which shall not be long.
There was a lot of money to be made in the framework knitting industry, but not for the common people that just operated these machines. If you wanted to earn hard cash, you'd have to be renting these machines out to the workers. In the 19th century, up until the 1830s, the wages actually went down 30% for the average framework knitter. The power was completely in the hands of the factory owners. And these were the people that were renting out the machines and renting out the houses that they lived in. It was exploitation, pure and simple. And there was very little in the eyes of the law that these workers could actually do anything about. If you were really angry about working conditions and you were living in Nottinghamshire in the early 19th century, you could have joined the Luddites. The Luddites were a secretive militant organisation. They wore disguises and carried weapons. The Luddites followed a strange and mysterious leader called King Ned Ludd. To this day, nobody knows who he really was, or if he even existed. This site is typically one of those which could be found around the East Midlands. The manager often lived on site to keep an eye on the workers. This place was actually built not long after the Luddite troubles. The manager of this site was quite fair to his workers in comparison to others. Sadly, such stories were rare, and some were not so lucky. But desperation and poverty sometimes resulted in great inventiveness. And in this case, the frame workers discovered something miraculous. They found with slight adjustment that they can make lace with machines. Their inventiveness would eventually result in Nottingham becoming the centre of the world's lace production. Sadly, their fortune was short-lived. The industrious businessmen of Nottingham went on to build bigger and better machines to make lace on. Over the next few years, the East Midlands' famous knitting industry was overshadowed by its new world-renowned child, lace. Knitting production was moved to larger factories both here and abroad, with big machines powered by engines. The old frame shops began to disappear. Ruddington is different. The Framework Knitters Museum is one of the only places left in the country where you can find the working and living conditions of this important, contentious and, well, quite often dangerous industry perfectly preserved for you to experience and explore. Hi. Nice jumper.